Hello everyone and welcome to Rhythm Railroad. I'm trying to do my first ever update of the layout because I've never done one before, and now it's about 2 years of progress on my layout, and just from watching other people do layout updates, I think it's very helpful. So I'm going to attempt one now, and also I didn't want to get too far into progress here and not have anything to kind of keep track of it. So I'm going to try to do this today. The plan is to do it in short videos so that YouTube will allow me to upload. So I'm trying to keep it short, but also show you all of the layout. So I'm going to do it in parts. And the first part is going to be just general information about the layout. I'm just going to, my cold tray is coming through now, right there. And I got the sound cranking. I haven't had a chance to turn down the volume yet because I just got those engines less than a year ago. So I'm gonna just mute this just so I can hear, so you can hear what I'm saying without having to fight all the sound from the engines. I decided to name the railroad Rhythm Railroad because I am a drummer by trade. I'm also a music teacher, and I thought that name would be appropriate, Rhythm Railroad. I also decided to go with N scale for a few reasons. One, I got into it about, I don't know, it was probably about 10 years ago or more, and I didn't have a lot of room, and my brother-in-law suggested, or rather recommended, getting into N scale because it was you could fit more track into less amount of space. And so I went with that, and I started just to expand my collection. And before I knew it, I had quite a few structures and locomotives, rolling stock, and so on and so forth. And once you're in it like that, then it's hard to switch over to anything else. I am a little envious of HO scalers because they have so many options, and there's so much available. But I really love that I can have this big or relatively big layout in N scale in a small room. So speaking of my room, this is basically a New York style Long Island cape with angled ceilings. I had to put that tape there so I wouldn't slam my head on the ledge like I normally do. I can see it. But these ceilings are a little awkward to work around with the backdrop. You have to cut all these angles, and also the track plan becomes a little bit difficult to get around with these little cubbies and ins and outs all around the layout. So it was a little bit weird trying to plan inside this room, but I think I got around it pretty well. And the track work is basically set up like a pretzel. So as you can see, it goes around, but it overlaps here. And it's basically a loop, but it's got a peninsula right in the middle of the room to do that in. The room is not tremendous. It's probably like, I don't know, 11 feet by 8 feet. But on the other side of the room, the ceiling is dormered, so it's a little higher. I was able to get further back into the room with tracks. But I'll show you around later on. What I wanted to just start with is just all the equipment I'm using. I'm using Pico tracks all the way through, including turnouts and anything else. I am using Electrofrogs on every single switch, every single turnout rather. And I am using both tortoise machines and servos to control my turnouts. I'm also using frog juicers to power the frogs, and I'm also using a Digitrax system basically for everything. So I have my booster there, my control box. I have my PR4, which is the new new adapter, the new module to connect the computer to the system, and I also have the Wi-Fi router, so that I can create a network and I can use my iPads and iPhones and so on, so forth, to control the train. So as the train comes around, I wanted to just basically show you what I'm using to control the train. I'm using an iPad, it's an old one, and I'm using Y-Throttle because it is an Apple-based software that is available. And I also have my old phones and iPods and things that I've been able to keep alive somehow. And I had to basically erase everything from them except Y-Throttle in order to get them to work correctly, because otherwise they were, getting stuck and crashing, and they're just really old phones. But I do have 3 there that I can use when people come over to run trains. Another thing I wanted to say about the layout is that I wanted to design a layout, now that I have a little bit of experience, in a way that I can get into operations, because I've never done operations before. But at the same time, I didn't want to depend on people to be here to run the layout. And I also didn't want to have to stop the train at one end, turn it around, bring it back. I didn't want to have like a staging section, because I just don't have the room. And it's just me most of the time. So I figured if I made this kind of layout, then I could just run trains, not really think about where they're going. They could just keep running around the way they are right now. I haven't looked at the train once since I came around. And just trust that they're just going to keep going around, and I don't have to worry about it. And in the meantime, I could be working on on scenery or another section or whatever, and still enjoy the trains going around. So I guess it was a double purpose in the way I designed this. And I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the way it came out. Basically what's happening, if you can kind of decipher this, is there's 2 main lines, you see down here, that are going around. So it's a double main line. It only turns into a single main line when it goes through the tunnel, which I'll show you later. And then it opens up again into a double main line, which then goes around again, and it's just a continuous loop like that. There is a 3rd line, which I call the short line, and that's more for like industry and like shorter trains and slower speeds and whatever, just something else that I can have long coal trains, for example, running on the double main line in the opposite directions or whatever, with the exception of this part. And then I could be doing my switching on the short line and yard work and whatever when I'm by myself. Okay, but when I'm with other people, I can have more options and more tasks to get through to make it more interesting. And I'll talk about that later on, all the industries that I have set up. I also have a reverse loop here, which becomes a Y in theory. So you can turn trains around here if you need to. But the reason I wanted that is so that I can go in the opposite direction. So I can go in both directions in the entire loop. So, if a train's coming this way, I could either continue going this way in like a counterclockwise motion, or I can turn it around and now go in this direction. And the other reverse loop starts here. The upper track here is this short line, which also becomes a reverse loop, allowing me to turn the train around and kind of go in the opposite direction. So I like options. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be stuck in one way and just be able to do both. And as you can see, the short line, which is this one here that is on the inside, becomes part of the main line at certain points, like right here. But then it opens up again and then becomes its own line all the way through this section here before it attaches again to here. So that's the basic gist of the layout design. What I also did was that because I'm using JMRI, I'm getting really into operations and stuff. I wanted to be able to have a dispatcher in the room next door, or downstairs or whatever. And so I designed a regular panel that a dispatch, like a real dispatcher, would see, more like, you know, like this, rather than looking at a whole layout. So once I put my occupancy detection stuff up, I have the actual modules. I just haven't gotten around to wiring everything. Then I could split all these sections into, you know, occupancy detection sections, and then the dispatcher can see the train going through each section. I'll have signaling eventually, and all the things that you need to dispatch. But the other cool thing that I was going to do, which I was inspired by, there's a young guy that has a layout with his dad. It's a Norfolk Southern layout. I forget where they live, but I was inspired by what he was doing. He was actually setting up his friend's computer to remotely control, to basically control his laptop or his computer from his own house. And I tried doing that, and I was able to figure it out. So my friend in New Jersey is actually able to see this, or this. He basically sees my desktop from his house, and he's able to control any of my turnouts and any of what I might have hooked up to JMRI from his house. And then through a walkie-talkie app, he can communicate with me from New Jersey, which is super cool that you could do that nowadays without having to physically be here in the same house. I have controllers, I forget what they're called. They're Digitrax, but I forget what they call them, to control every single turnout from JMRI. So, for example, if I hit this here, you'll see that now it's switched, and right behind me you can actually hear the tortoise machine going as it switches the turnout. So that's super cool when it comes to me controlling the train by myself, because I can basically change any track from here. It's rather than having to go and hit a toggle switch, or, you know, flick it with my finger, or whatever it is that I have to do. So all the main line and the short line turnouts are now able to be controlled through here, which is fantastic. I think I got through everything as far as the main concept of the layout. And, you know, the only thing I didn't talk about was the fact that this room is going to be here probably for another 5 or 6 years before I get ready to gut it and redo it. Or I might even go up with the house and just add a real size, like a real ceiling, like a regular ceiling, and then go up and build an attic from there. But I don't, you know, I think I have about 5 or 6 years to finish this layout up and still enjoy it. So that's that. So this is part one. In the next part, I'm going to start describing particular sections of the layout and breaking it down little by little, so you can all see how much I've done so far on the layout. So I'll see you in part two.